"Just pretend you're mine for tonight," said the CEO. The single dad's reply left. Her speechless Olivia Kane was the kind of woman whose name echoed through boardrooms and business magazines. The world knew her as the relentless CEO of Sterling Industries, a woman who had turned an empire of glass and steel into her own reflection, flawless, commanding, untouchable. Yet power often hides loneliness behind its shine. And tonight, on the 33rd floor of Sterling Tower, that loneliness was heavy enough to make her chest ache. The building was nearly silent, save for the faint hum of the city below and the rhythmic sweep of a mop gliding across the marble. Jack Miller moved with the careful precision of someone long used to quiet. There was dignity in the way he worked, the calm of a man who had once been broken and rebuilt himself piece by piece. Olivia had watched him for weeks, convincing herself it was nothing but curiosity. But the truth pressed deeper. There was steadiness in him, a quiet courage she had long forgotten existed. Her heels clicked softly as she stepped out of her office. The sound made him look up, and the two worlds they lived in collided for the first time. His blue eyes met hers, not the corporate mask she wore for shareholders, but the woman beneath. "I need to ask you something," she said, her voice steadier than her heartbeat. He stopped, mop handle resting in his palm. "Yes, ma'am?" "Tomorrow night," she began. "There's a gala. Something I can't face alone." The words felt foreign in her mouth. "I need you to pretend to love me." Just for 7 minutes, Jack blinked. It should have sounded absurd. A CEO asking the janitor to fake affection? Yet her eyes, they weren't joking. They were lonely. 7 minutes, he repeated quietly. She nodded. Her fingers trembled. He tilted his head. "Why?" Olivia turned to the glass wall overlooking the glittering city. "Because they'll ask about my personal life, and I can't tell them the truth. The truth is I go home to an empty penthouse, eat takeout, and drown in spreadsheets." He didn't speak for a long moment. Grief recognizes grief. He knew that silence she described. Once he'd been an aerospace engineer with designs that carried his name. Then came the lawsuit, the bankruptcy, the accident. The wife who never came home, leaving a daughter who still believed he could fix anything. Finally he said, "All right, 7 minutes." That night he lay awake, the city hum fading beyond his apartment window. Her voice echoed in his mind. "Pretend you love me for 7 minutes." It should have been laughable, but wasn't. He looked toward the small bedroom where his 7-year-old daughter Emma slept, clutching a stuffed rabbit to her chest. Her drawings, castles, rockets, stars, covered the walls. They were the colors that kept his world alive. He thought about what he'd lost, his career, his wife, his certainty, and what remained. Dignity, however fragile. Maybe Olivia Kane's strange request was not about money. Maybe it was a moment of being seen. The next evening, the mirror barely recognized him. The midnight blue suit fit perfectly, the tie smooth beneath his rough fingers. For the first time in years, he looked like the man he used to be. Down in the lobby, security double-checked his name. Then the elevator doors opened, and she was there. Olivia Kane. Gone was the armor of her business suit. In its place shimmered an emerald dress that caught the light like breath held too long. "You clean up nice," she said with a faint smile. He smiled back. "What's our story?" "We met at a coffee shop," she said, voice practiced but soft. "You were reading a book on engineering. I asked about it. We've been seeing each other 2 months, and if they ask about the future, tell them we're taking it one day at a time." The elevator opened to a ballroom glittering with chandeliers and whispered wealth. As they stepped out, Olivia's hand slipped into his. 7 minutes, he murmured. She nodded. Something flickered in her eyes. Fear, maybe hope. They moved through the crowd together. Jack listened, smiled, spoke when prompted. But soon he found himself talking easily, about design, innovation, until Olivia laughed, a real laugh, unguarded and bright. 7 minutes stretched to 15. Then 30. Time lost its count. When an older board member asked what made her so sure about the man at her side, Olivia looked at Jack and answered simply, "He sees me." The words struck him like truth uncovered. Because somewhere between pretending and reality, he had begun to see her too. Later, on the balcony, the air was cooler. Olivia leaned against the railing, city lights scattering below. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For making me feel normal." For a few minutes in there, I wasn't a CEO, I was just me. He understood. He had lived that emptiness. "You're welcome," he said. Silence fell, the kind that hums with everything unspoken. "This is crazy," she murmured. "Maybe," he said, "but it feels real." When she turned toward him, her eyes reflected the city glow. The space between them disappeared, and for the first time, neither of them was pretending. The morning after the gala, Jack changed back into gray coveralls that smelled faintly of bleach and dust. Sterling Tower gleamed as always, polished and indifferent, but something inside him had shifted. At his locker, he found an envelope addressed in precise handwriting. Inside was payment more than generous, and a small note with 2 words, "Thank you." It should have satisfied him. It didn't. Money solved shoes and rent and groceries, but it couldn't file last night under finished. It couldn't quiet the echo of her laugh or the warmth of her hand in his. He pushed his cart down the executive hallway, telling himself the evening had been an unusual job with a clear end. Yet every time the elevator chimed, he listened for the cadence of heels he had already memorized. He worked later than usual, focusing on scuffed corners and fingerprints no one else would notice, because concentrating on small things kept him from thinking about what was too big to hold. It happened on a quiet Wednesday, when the lobby felt like a hollow organ after the afternoon rush. Jack wheeled the cart across the marble, then looked up. Olivia stood just inside the revolving door. No silk or diamonds, just worn jeans, a soft sweater, a garment bag in her hand. She looked almost like someone who had wandered in from another life and wasn't sure she wanted to return. "I came to return the suit," she said. "You could have sent it with security," he answered, trying to keep his voice even. "I wanted to make sure it fits properly," she said, awkward and honest. "For next time." Before he could reply, a small voice lifted from a corner table. "Daddy!" Emma waved, crayon-stained fingers fluttering. Her homework was spread like treasure across the marble, her feet swinging as if they might lift her into the air. Jack had arranged with security to let her wait there after school on evenings when he couldn't make it home in time. Emma spotted Olivia, studied her with frank curiosity, then pushed a drawing forward. "A tall building, tiny windows, a narrow door. It's a castle," Emma explained. "But it's lonely because only one person lives there." Olivia knelt beside her, emerald polish gone from her nails, empathy softening her face. "Maybe the person in the castle just needs to learn how to open the door." Emma nodded in fierce agreement, selected a purple crayon, and drew a wide doorway glowing with color. "There. Now people can come visit." She looked up, wise without trying. "Daddy, you should invite Miss Kane to dinner. She looks like she doesn't get invited to things very much." Olivia laughed, surprised by the sound of it. The garment bag slipped slightly in her grip, as if the decision were heavier than the fabric inside. Jack felt the ground shift under a choice he hadn't planned to make. "Spaghetti?" he heard himself say. "Nothing fancy." "Spaghetti sounds perfect," Olivia replied. The building where Jack lived was nothing like Sterling Tower. The hallway paint had faded into a color that couldn't decide what it used to be. The stairwell echoed. Someone's cooking drifted through the vents, garlic and warmth. When Jack opened his door and Emma's laughter spilled out, Olivia felt something inside her lower its guard. The apartment was small, but it was alive. Photos of Emma through the years lined a shelf. Gap-toothed smiles, birthday candles, a paper crown. The refrigerator wore art like armor, stars, castles, stick figures holding hands. "We're having spaghetti," Jack said, tying on an apron with a sheepish grin that made him look younger. Fair warning, Emma made dessert. She calls them surprise cookies. Dinner was chaos that somehow made perfect sense. Emma told a long story about a science experiment that went slightly wrong and very right. Jack contributed dry, quiet jokes about odd things he found on night shifts. A single high heel in a stairwell, a bouquet of roses abandoned in the copy room, a plastic crown under a boardroom chair. Olivia listened, laughed without practicing first, and reached for seconds of pasta that tasted better than any catered plate she could remember. "What's the secret?" she asked. Jack looked embarrassed. "Cinnamon," he admitted. "Just a pinch." The cookies were a miracle of marshmallows and chocolate and crushed crackers, slightly lopsided and completely joyful. Afterward, Emma yawned over her milk and Jack sent her to brush her teeth. The apartment settled into a comfortable hush. Olivia stood at the sink, drying dishes, older than she was, with a towel printed in fading strawberries. "Thank you," she said at last. "For what?" Jack asked, leaning against the counter. "For letting me see this," she answered, gesturing gently to everything. The chipped mug that clearly meant something. The grocery list in 2 handwritings, the small flower Emma had tucked into a jar. "Your real life." "It's not much," he said, a touch of apology in his voice. "It's everything," she replied, and surprised herself with how true it felt. He reached for the next plate. Their fingers brushed. Neither moved away. The distance decided for them. The kiss was unplanned, careful at first, then real enough to erase the line between acting and truth. When they broke apart, Olivia pressed her forehead to his collarbone, breath unsteady. "This changes everything," she whispered. "Does it have to?" he asked, voice rough with hope. "You don't understand my world," she said, stepping back, eyes bright. "I can't just date someone. Every move is judged, twisted, sold. It won't stay ours." He wanted to say the world didn't get a say in the room where Emma slept and laughter lived, but he saw the cost in her face, and the argument folded into silence. They stood side by side, aware of a line they had already crossed and a cliff they couldn't unsee. The door that opened next didn't belong to Jack's apartment or Olivia's heart. It belonged to the office where power is kept polished. 2 days later, the storm arrived, his polished shoes clicking across Olivia's office floor. Richard Hale, CFO, settled into the chair opposite her as if testing its fit. He set a leather folder on her desk with quiet ceremony and flipped it open. Photographs slid across wood like evidence. "Telephoto lenses don't lie," he said, the smile not reaching his eyes. "The board has concerns." Olivia kept her face still. Her pulse was anything but. A CEO meeting privately with a janitor, entering his apartment, kissing him in the hallway. "It's not the image investors pay for," Richard continued. He let the silence turn predatory. "And it gets worse. Jack Miller, former aerospace engineer, yes, but with a record. A bar altercation, technically dismissed. The stain remains. Had a failed lawsuit, bankruptcy, a dead wife. It's not a good look for the Sterling brand." He leaned forward. "This is simple. End the distraction or face a vote of no confidence. Monday morning, company or him." When the door closed behind him, the office seemed to expand around her. An aquarium of glass and light where the only sound was her own breathing. Company or him. Legacy or love. She had held an empire together so long she had confused holding with belonging. She stared at the city until the buildings blurred, then reached for her phone and not the intercom. The choice could not be made alone or in silence. Jack was already at the diner when she arrived, shoulders slightly hunched, a cup of coffee going cold at his elbow. Neon stuttered against the window, making the rain outside look like it wanted to be snow. "Tell me about the arrest," she said without preamble. He turned the cup in his hands, watching the swirl. "A guy was harassing a waitress. He wouldn't take no. I stepped in. It got ugly. Security footage cleared me. Charges dropped. The record stayed. He didn't look up. People see what they want to see." He told the rest without ornament. The safety violations he brought forward. The company that buried him for it. The lawsuit that ate their savings. The night his wife didn't come home. The way grief rearranges a house until you don't recognize the furniture or the man sitting in it. "I lost everything," he said simply. "Except Emma." She reached for his hand. He pulled his back, not unkindly. "I don't apologize," he said. "Just don't make this harder." "What are you saying?" she asked, afraid she knew. "I'm saying you should choose the company," he said quietly. "Don't throw away what you built for someone like me." He stood, left bills on the table, and stepped into the rain. The bell over the diner door chimed like a small doomed hope. Olivia watched his shape blur through glass and water until it was only her reflection left, fractured into pieces she didn't recognize. Monday dawned gray, the kind of Chicago rain that finds the seams in every umbrella. In her penthouse mirror, Olivia assembled the armor. Hair precise, suit exact, eyes indifferent. Behind the mask waited portraits of her parents, partners in life and work, proof that the empire had not been built by one set of hands. She had mistaken inheritance for isolation. She remembered Emma's drawing with the open door and wondered how children knew so much so soon. By 9, the boardroom hummed with contained judgment. 12 faces framed a table that gleamed like a warning. Richard sat at the far end with his documents arranged in a small, quiet threat. When Olivia entered, conversations died without being asked. She did not sit. You've asked for my decision, she said evenly. Company or a personal life you consider unbecoming of a CEO. A rustle of discomfort moved like wind through wheat. Richard's smile sharpened. He thought he had already won. Before I answer, she continued, opening her leather portfolio, you should know how your information was gathered. She placed photos on the table, the same images Richard had slid across her desk, then added security reports, access logs, and a printed thread of emails. She had not slept much since the diner. She had worked instead, and when Olivia Kane worked, she left little to chance. This wasn't due diligence, she said, each word set down like a stone. It was sabotage, unauthorized surveillance, falsified background checks, a coordinated attempt to force my hand. She lifted her gaze to Richard. By the man sitting across from me. The room changed shape. Chairs leaned forward. Hands stilled. Richard tried to smile again, but this time his mouth didn't remember the steps. You wanted me to choose, Olivia said, voice steady as glass. So I have. I choose to expose you. I choose the integrity of this company. I choose what my parents actually built, trust. By noon, the vote was unanimous. Richard Hale was escorted from the building, leaving his portfolio like a shed skin on the polished table. Directors turned to Olivia with relief and praise and careful jokes meant to ease the tension. On paper, she had won. The empire was safe. Her chair was hers. Yet when she closed her office door, the city outside looked like a circuit board again. Beautiful, cold, and impersonal. Winning without the right people beside you is a clean, echoing loneliness. She thought of Jack's tired smile and Emma's doorway drawn in defiant purple. She imagined spaghetti with cinnamon and a small hand tugging two larger ones to the table. She asked herself whether power that kept you untouched was worth the price of never being held. The rain kept falling. The building kept gleaming. Somewhere on a quieter floor, a mop glided over marble with the stoic patience of a man who had learned to endure. She sat at her desk and understood that she had been measuring success with the wrong ruler. Days folded into weeks. Jack kept pushing his cart through Sterling Tower's spotless corridors, pretending that night at the diner had ended something instead of pausing it. He told himself he'd done the right thing, spared Olivia from scandal, spared Emma from disappointment, but the quiet in his apartment argued otherwise. Some evenings he caught himself pausing by the window, watching headlights smear through rain, hearing her voice in memory instead of sound. Emma sat at the kitchen table one night, drawing as usual. Crayons rolled between her fingers like thoughts she couldn't quite name. Daddy, she said suddenly, why did you tell Miss Kane she couldn't love us anymore? The plate slipped in his hands. What do you mean, sweetheart? I heard you, she said simply. At the diner. You told her to pick her job. But what if she didn't want to pick? What if she wanted to fight for us? Her words landed harder than any corporate ultimatum. Jack sank into the chair across from her. On the paper before her was a house with yellow windows and 3 stick figures holding hands. Beneath it, written in wobbly block letters, this is what love looks like. He didn't sleep much that night. By morning, he had made a decision that terrified him more than losing everything had the first time. He called in sick, walked Emma to school, and rode the elevator to the 33rd floor without a mop or a uniform. Not to clean, to find her. That afternoon, a sleek black car idled by the school gates. Olivia stepped out, utterly out of place among minivans and backpacks. She spotted Emma first, ponytail bouncing, backpack swinging, and then Jack striding toward her. Their eyes met across the distance. The years they hadn't lived together folded away like a map returning to its center. Emma, fearless as always, took both their hands. I told Daddy he was being silly, she announced proudly. I told him you'd fight for us if he let you. Jack looked down at his daughter, then up at Olivia. Something in him unclenched. She's right, he said softly. I was being selfish. I was so afraid of watching you lose everything that I never asked what you wanted. He drew a breath that felt like the edge of a cliff. So I'm asking now. What do you want, Olivia? Minutes later, they sat in a corner booth of a small ice cream shop that smelled of sugar and childhood. Emma worked her way through a sundae almost bigger than her head, humming to herself. Olivia reached into her bag and unfolded a piece of paper, creased, colored, familiar. Emma's drawing of the glowing house. I fought for us, Olivia said quietly. When they tried to make me choose, I fought for the right to have both, the company and a family. I won, but it didn't feel like winning without you. She smoothed the wrinkles with her fingertips. Your daughter gave us the blueprint. Maybe it's time we start building. Jack stared at the picture, then at her. For the first time in years, hope didn't feel dangerous. It felt possible. 6 months later, the little house on a quiet Chicago street hummed with morning life. Sunlight poured through thin curtains, touching everything it could reach. The upright piano where Emma practiced her scales. The kitchen where Olivia flipped pancakes. The living room where Jack crouched over a chair with a wobbly leg. The air smelled of syrup and sawdust and new beginnings. Emma's laughter floated down the hallway when she hit the wrong note. Olivia called encouragement over her shoulder. Jack hummed while tightening a screw. The sounds layered like a song written by ordinary life. On the refrigerator hung a framed paper, the adoption finalized. Emma had called Olivia Mom once by accident, and the name had stayed. Olivia still ran Sterling Industries. She still made choices that shaped thousands of lives. But success had a different measurement now. Quiet mornings, messy kitchens, the knowledge that she didn't have to rule her world alone. Power could build towers. Love built homes that stayed standing when the lights went out. Jack looked up from his work to find Olivia watching him from the doorway, flour dusting her sweater, sunlight in her hair. She crossed the room and set a plate of pancakes on the table. For a moment they just stood there, remembering all the nights when this seemed impossible. Then Emma tugged their hands and pulled them down beside her. "We're a real family now," she declared, sliding her newest drawing across the table. A house with yellow windows, 3 figures holding hands in front. Jack laughed, voice thick. "That's right, kiddo. This is what love looks like." Olivia smiled, a memory flickering through her mind. The night she had stood in her office, too lonely to breathe, asking a stranger to pretend for 7 minutes. She almost laughed at how foolish it had seemed, because those 7 borrowed minutes had become something endless. Outside, the world kept spinning, markets opening, meetings waiting, but inside the little house, the only clock that mattered was the rhythm of their laughter, the melody of a piano still learning its way. Olivia Kane had finally discovered the definition of success that counted. Not empires, not headlines, family.